There's two types of rugby matches when it comes to fantasy MLR. One type that fantasy managers absolutely love, the other not so much. And you can probably guess it has a lot to do with number of points scored. We had a taste of both of those in Major League Rugby's round 6. We'll break down those matchups and the implications they had on fantasy MLR, talk about the top performers from the past weekend, have a look at who's available on the waiver wire, and of course give our predictions in round 7. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 59 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. I'm Ryan Yee, as always with me every single week, Matt Yee. And look who we got here. Picking a damn good week to make a return appearance here. I know you're a busy guy, but Devin Vanderpool is in the house. We'll tell our viewers and listeners why I say it's a damn good week that you're choosing to return here to the Fantasy Ruckers Show. But how's it going, boys? A pretty good round 6 for you guys in the world of fantasy rugby.
Hey, glad to be back, boys. Hey, I miss you guys.
Look. I called it into existence last week. I said it. Ryan, I told you. Vandy was off the show. He didn't even need to hear it. He heard it from...
I listened.
He listened. He listened, but he didn't need to listen to the show to hear what I was saying.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He got the message
I
telepathically.
Heard it from the mountaintops, baby.
Oh yeah, telling him that the boys were about to go on a
That's
run.
right.
And look at us. We're both 2 in a row.
Right.
I've got 4 in a row, but hey, no, neither here nor there. But hey, the boys got 2 in a row.
Subtle flex.
Let's go. We're
Poop
keeping
emojis.
it going.
Poop emojis.
We're closer to the playoffs here, Vandy. Both of us gonna make it this year.
I hope,
All
man.
right.
I hope.
And we'll get all of our viewers and listeners updated here. Of course, we're talking about the Fantasy Ruckers League and how that's been going so far. Some of these guys are absolutely rolling right now. We're gonna obviously break it all down, give you the latest in the Fantasy Ruckers League. Give you guys an update of the Fantasy Ruckers League, but we got a jam-packed episode in this one. Obviously, a very exciting round 6 that we need to break down, talk about some of those top performers. I mentioned it in the tease. There's 2 types of matches that happen in the world of fantasy MLR. There's one that the fantasy MLR managers absolutely love, and there's one that type of match that fantasy managers don't necessarily have a good time watching, and we got a little bit of a taste of both of them in round 6. Some matches absolutely blowing points out of the water there from both a actual rugby perspective and from a fantasy MLR perspective. You guys being on obviously the good side of that, and then of course there are some matches where points are a little bit harder to come by, but nonetheless still a lot of exciting rugby that we got to break down. So we're going to get to all of that. Of course, we're going to talk the latest news and notes happening across the league. Lots of news in coming out of round 6 over the past week or so. A lot of trades going down, which is pretty interesting to see midway point through the season. So we're going to break that all down, and then of course get into a little bit of waiver wire streaming options here heading into round 7, and then break down some of the round 7 matchups as well as the fantasy MLR season trucks on here in 2023. But before we get into any of that, of course, every single week we tell you, hey, if you're not doing it already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers. Been a super fun journey so far of trying to make fantasy MLR reality, and that's where you're going to get all your fantasy MLR content. We also got a website too, thefantasyruckers.com. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do so, because not only if you're even someone that enjoys following fantasy MLR, if you're just a stats junkie, we've been tracking a whole bunch of stats over the course of the 2023 season. You'll be able to find all of it on thefantasyruckers.com. Link down below in the description. You can see above here on the YouTube video the link to all of our social media channels are up there as well. If you're listening, of course, that's at the Fantasy Ruckers. And if all that isn't enough for you, we have a Discord community that we talk about every single week too. It's been absolutely popping off. A lot of fun talking with the fantasy MLR community. They talk about obviously the latest in fantasy rugby and fantasy MLR, but also just the latest happenings around the rugby world. Obviously, Six Nations just wrapped up. Super Rugby is in full swing. We talk about it all over there in our Discord community, so you can check that out. Link down below as well. But yeah, I guess we gotta. Should we get to the Fantasy Ruckers update, or should we go over this news first?
No,
here, guys?
no. Let's follow the schedule. Let's
All
get
right.
to the news and
Do the
notes. Keep
news,
the people
yeah.
waiting to see just how
I-
much we won by this week.
I know you guys are itching. That's why I know you guys are itching to stop talking.
I can wait.
To start talking trash here, because this is
Ah,
this
you
is
know.
a monumental moment here.
The
You
trash
guys-
talk never ends. I've been
That's-
doing it for
that is
5
true.
weeks.
All right,
That's right.
let's get into some of the latest news and notes here coming out of round 6 in the MLR before we start talking a little bit of fantasy MLR. The first one that I want to go over here is the MLR teams have released what looks like their city jerseys for this 2023 season. I think there's varying opinions when it comes to how these different jerseys look. Some better than others. I've posted
better.
in the Discord chat for you guys here, Matt and Vandy. But having a initial look at these jerseys, kind of overall thoughts. What are your favorites? What are your least favorites? Thoughts on these city-style jerseys for the MLR teams across the league.
I mean, look at those NOLA gold ones, man.
You like that one, eh?
Dude, I don't know
Randy.
what it is. That's cool.
Vandy, you don't even know what it is. Before the show, you're telling me, oh,
I
it's
thought
a
it was
dragon.
snake. I thought it was
You
a
told
snake.
me it's a dragon. You told me it's a snake. It could have been a log
Dude,
for
an alligator
I
is
could have
basically a
guessed.
dragon.
Yeah, it's true. It's a
That is
reptile.
true.
An
I mean,
alligator
it's closer
is a
to
dragon.
it's closer to a dinosaur.
They're both
But, you know.
dragons. What?
They're all reptiles.
Yeah, come on now.
I don't know. Dragon's a mythical creature. Let's get it straight over here. But the Nola one, Vandy, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The
I
NOLA
like.
one.
Okay, but that Old Glory one is sick too. That cherry.
Oh yeah,
That one's
look at
slick.
that thing.
That one's real
Yeah.
slick.
You know what? I'll also bring up one. I don't know if people have been giving, I think maybe the Nola Gold one a little bit more flack than it deserves. And I think actually the worst one is the New York one.
Yeah.
Okay.
The New York one. What the heck are you like out of this? You have the biggest city, the greatest city on earth. And you put a New York in a square,
The greatest
your jersey?
city on earth, eh?
the biggest city.
All right,
Maybe
that's
not the
fair.
greatest. You're right. It might not be the greatest, but the biggest city on earth, and you put a New York in a square on the front of your jersey. Your regular jerseys are more city edition than the New York on the front of your jersey. At least you have a bridge on that one that represents the city. Like, what are you even thinking?
Yeah, and
The only acceptable ones that can just have the name on it is the Chicago one, because those are the sweetest jerseys out of all of them.
You know,
like the
actually,
unreal
that
looking
is true.
jerseys.
Chicago
And I was
one?
talking. I was talking about this with Vandy
Dude.
before. I think if you know the story behind it, obviously Chicago came out with, I believe, a cross kind of post with the Chicago Bulls, and this is
Yeah.
where that's emulating from. They're really embracing the Chicago sports scene. It's basically it looks exactly like the Chicago Bulls jersey. It has the pinstripes there, obviously the hounds across the chest instead of the Bulls. Pretty interesting stuff there. Just to go to Vandy's point about the Nolan, I don't know. It looks kind of a little bit too busy for me. Kind of reminds me of the Ed Hardy designer.
You know what
and,
it looks like?
A whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
It looks like if you're playing a video game and designing a jersey, and
Yeah.
they let you to copy and paste the logo on there, so it doesn't quite fill out the jersey right.
That is
Yeah.
true. That is true.
But honestly,
I'll-
I think the most banging jersey is the San Diego one. I know everybody thought I was a San Diego fan
Ah.
last year. I think
You
that's my
are.
favorite one.
okay.
Well, I think you're just going into everybody's, everybody's
San
thoughts,
Diego-
everybody's
San
conspiracy.
Diego,
Everybody knows.
Old Glory, and then probably Seattle's. I like Seattle's.
Fair enough. I don't know what's with the arrows and the lightning. Like, I don't quite understand. They
No,
had that
me
last year
neither.
in their city
Yeah, it
jersey.
doesn't make
What's
sense.
with the lightning? What does the lightning have to do with arrows? I don't understand. I feel like they could have done something cooler. The one I do like, though, and I want to get your guys' take on this, is I know the Rugby Atlanta team really sucked with branding, but they killed it with these peach jerseys.
You
Yeah.
like
I mean,
them? I don't
Georgia
know.
Georgia
Ah, okay,
peaches,
okay,
the peach
sure.
color. I think it's
Okay.
gorgeous.
I'm not
I
huge
will
on
s-
them.
I will
they're
say-
nice.
I will say one thing. I think the whole skyline whole theme is getting a little bit blown out of proportion here.
Like with
I
Dallas and
think
Seattle?
I think we got moving on. I mean, you have the skyline for these Atlanta jerseys kind of faded in there. You have
Yeah.
the Seattle skyline on their jerseys.
Yeah.
You got the Dallas
Dallas
skyline on
one,
their
yeah.
jersey.
Houston.
It appears like you got the Houston at the
It
bottom.
looks like
there
New York
as
has it
well.
too behind the little. They got like the Freedom Towers in the background.
Yeah, and then you
Maybe
got
Maybe it's just pixely.
And then you got the palm trees for San Diego. I don't know, the whole skyline thing, a little bit getting blown out of proportion.
I
but
think if that
nonetheless,
Utah one was like red, I think that'd be my favorite one.
you know,
I'm just not a big
I
fan
don't-
of the color scheme. The
No,
palette's
no.
a little weird.
no bias there, right? No bias at all there.
Yeah, he's a San Diego fan, anyways.
Yeah, no kidding. All right. But yeah, let's move on. Again, those you can check out on social media. Kind of fun there. Should be interesting to see how these teams come out. And it always looks different. Obviously, we had our opinions about the jerseys heading into the season as well. It's different to see like a AI generated like digital version of the jersey versus actually seeing the jersey itself.
True.
So we'll see how these all look when they do take the field over the coming next few weeks. So it should be interesting to say. I will add though too as well, Chicago coming out with some new jerseys this past week too with the collars and stuff. You know I love a good collar. I thought the Chicago Hounds jersey, even though we saw half of rugby and didn't get to see the full match there with that Seattle Chicago Hounds match, which we'll obviously get into, I did like the jersey.
Good
that
playing
Chicago
The
some
only thing
rain.
is, I keep getting them and Atlanta mixed up. Every time I turn on a match and I see that green of Atlanta,
Yeah,
I'm
it
like,
is
oh, that's
true.
Chicago. And then I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah,
It is
it is
That's not
trippy.
Chicago.
It's
All right,
really
let's shift
trippy.
on over to some more news that kind of has some fantasy implication here. Something that we just missed on after last week's episode, but he didn't make an appearance in this past week, so something to look out for moving forward, though. Slade McDowell, he is returning to the New England Free Jacks. This is a guy that had huge fantasy implication in 2022, finishing 11th overall in the standings based on our new added stats. He was the 4th best in tackles in the league, top 25 in meters gained, kind of the prototypical guy that is going to be successful in fantasy MLR. Obviously, the Free Jacks have a whole bunch of back row players there, so it's going to be interesting to see how Slade fits in that and the time that he gets to play there. I would imagine that he gets slotted in pretty quickly here once he gets adjusted back with the team. But nonetheless, Slade McDowell returning to Boston to play for the Free Jacks.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big guy for I mean, even the stats we used last year, he was big for fantasy implications. And now the stats we use this year, I think everything in our preseason look, Ryan, everything just seemed to, he seemed to be a guy that really, we want him to put him at the top of our tables, top of our list, but we just didn't know when he was coming back or if he was coming back. So it's a great booster in New England Free Jacks. I think he'll be a big little waiver wire pickup here.
He actually was already picked up.
Yeah, he was already picked up. But like you
Yeah.
said, I think we'll have to see how he fits into the lineup. They got Mitch Jacobson. William Conradi just came off a really big game, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that, or I was going to say our league obviously thinks that he's going to have a big impact too because the money was dropped on him. The Dankus Anchors Hokie, he dropped a whole $20 on Slade McDowell, 20% of his fab budget to lock
Real
him
money
up,
too.
beating MLR Stats, who dropped $16 on his own. So that's got to hurt a little bit. Even $16 not cutting it enough to pick up Slade McDowell. But we'll see whether or not it's worth it here for the Dankus Anchors. But all signs point, if he gets that playing time and is able to do even close to what he was able to do last season, a midway addition of Slade McDowell to your fantasy roster is going to be a big time impact there in moving forward. And then we mentioned it here heading into the news is that a whole flurry of trades, and obviously got to give a shout out to James Dealey and MLR Stats for getting these trade graphics out there and keeping us posted with all the roster moves that are happening, but a couple of them happening over the course of the week. We haven't seen trades I feel like in a little bit here in the MLR, but it seems like they all timed at the once. But the biggest one I would say coming out of this week is the addition of Kyle Bailey to Old Glory DC. They receive the playing rights for Kyle Bailey from the Toronto Arrows in exchange for salary cap considerations. Kyle Bailey is a guy that had 10 games last season and 7 starts. He captained the Gold before making the switch to the Arrows. This is a guy that has been moving around the league. And it's interesting because I think with what Old Glory DC is going through right now, especially with some of the injuries that they have, and even some of I think there has been an understanding now that maybe there needs to be a little bit more size that's added to this Old Glory DC pack. Kyle Bailey standing at 6'5", 245 pounds might just be the key player that can hop in there, earn a role into that starting pack and make a big difference. Whether or not that's going to be a fantasy difference, this is a guy, again, second row position, not a position that's really scoring you much points, but he does have also the ability to play blindside flanker as well. So seeing where he kind of fits in that role and whether or not he translates that to fantasy points will be interesting to see over the coming weeks.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that we didn't see him in the lineup at all this year. So I guess we maybe should have seen this coming. But you never really know with injuries in this league. But Toronto Arrows been pretty good with that, and they haven't had him on that list. I think he's a stud. So he'll continue to do the same for Old Glory DC.
And just a couple other trades happening as well. Not really anything that has fantasy impact. All just kind of more of a financial kind of exchange. There is a exchange with Rugby Atlanta and the NOLA Gold. NOLA receiving salary cap considerations, Atlanta receiving the playing rights to Chase Score Haskin, which is insane. He was drafted 6th overall in 2021 by Rugby New York. Made his debut for NOLA in 2022. So a guy that really hasn't made his name yet in the MLR, but again, obviously some movement there, but I don't know if that's going to have any fantasy impact anytime soon. And then just the last thing in terms of financial kind of exchanges, NOLA receiving salary cap considerations, and Utah receiving a second round pick for the 2023 collegiate draft. So just a couple.
I feel like
there.
salary cap considerations
NOLA
is
up to?
money laundering, man.
What is NOLA up to? That is
What's
a
NOLA
very
up
good
to?
question.
That's two
Matt.
trades for salary cap, 2 trades for money laundering.
Money laundering, that's what it is.
Are they money laundering?
I'm
Or
telling you.
are they planning on picking up a big international signing?
That is true, and maybe that
Laundering.
is maybe that is the 3D chess that you have to play as the guy who's leading the Fantasy Ruckers League right now, having that understanding of what is really happening here with some of these moves. And hey, I wouldn't be
come off and
surprised.
swell Matt's head with that comment. Come on.
Well, I will say though, that is a good point though. Who knows? Who knows what NOLA could be up to here?
Money laundering.
Earning some more money in there to maybe make that signing. And then just a couple last things that I want to mention from a roster standpoint. The Toronto Arrows making a couple signings. We know that the Arrows have been going through a whole bunch of injury problems so far. Obviously, it's been a stretch for them. Them having not played at home yet this 2023 season, but they have signed Rugby Canada Sevens winger Deshaun Bowen, who is 26 years old, I believe, and then center Dawson Fatorich, who is 24 and has had 2 caps with the Canadian 15s team as well. So obviously two native Canadian guys that joined the only Canadian club in the MLR to give them some well-needed help.
Bowen looks like a big dude
for their injury help there.
Yeah, big boy. I mean, they both again, like you said, sometimes the sevens team. I know they both played for Pacific Pride in the BC men's league. So they had their 15s experience. I don't know how much impact they're going to have on this Arrows team. I honestly think this was just kind of them scrambling to try and get some guys on the roster. These guys were probably, I think, were left off of the Canada Sevens roster for the upcoming tours or upcoming tournaments. So yeah, I think they're just scrambling at this point because they're in the double digits now for injury.
And then just the last thing, again, not really fantasy perspective, but kind of more so just a good sign for kind of the growth of the MLR and opportunities there. It sounds like, and this has been posted by our very own Bill Baker of Eagles Overseas, who is obviously a member of the Fantasy Ruckers League. He quoted an article here that Toulouse is scheduled to go on an American tour during the upcoming Rugby World Cup in September. Stade Toulouse has a partnership with the Utah Warriors in Major League Rugby, so there's possibly an opportunity here for this club to maybe make their rounds here in stateside and play some of these MLR teams, which should be interesting to see how they kind of match up with that.
I don't want to see them play MLR teams because they're gonna whoop every MLR team's butts. I want to see the MLR team put together an all-star team.
That would be cool
to play Stade Toulouse. That would be unreal. All the guys that aren't at the World Cup, well, America and Canada are not at the World Cup. So all the MLR guys are going to be here, except some of the international guys. Have an all-star team for the MLR. Play the Stade Toulouse guys. That would be an unreal match. I think that's a great way to get exposure to the MLR and exposure to some of the top players in the league.
Absolutely. All right.
I hope you're listening.
That's all the news and notes. Are you guys ready? Is it time to give you a little bit of an update?
It's been time, Ryan. It's been time. Hello, let's go. Here wins. Here wins.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye.
Hear ye, hear ye. Here is Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers League update. If you've been following so far this season, it has been an exciting one so far this season. And oh, how the tables have turned in this Fantasy Ruckers League. If you have been following along for at least the past couple seasons, you guys all understand the struggles that both Vandy and Matt have been going through over the course of that inaugural season. But if you check out the Fantasy Ruckers League this year, there's an unfamiliar name at the top of this list. And it's your very own Matt Yee, Ruck and Roll, sitting atop of the standing still. And it's starting to run away with things. You're the first person to score and tally up a total 500 fantasy points.
Yeah.
And actually, the total is 539.1
Yeah.
total fantasy points. But the storyline doesn't end there, though, because Vandy, you have been struggling to start off this 2023 year as well. But hey, you went back to back. And you got
Back
two
to
wins
back,
here.
baby.
You slowly moving up the standings here. The
Most
total-
points this week. I just want to put that out
There
there.
you go. And we'll get into these matchups here. But Vandy, you're turning things around here, and it looks like you might be on a little bit of a hot streak here. We'll
That's
see
what's
whether
called
or
a
not you
dark
can
horse, boys.
keep it going. That's you got to keep the hope alive. But all right, let's break down some of these fantasy matchups that were happening in round 6. Had some very close matchups to mention, and that included you, Matt, with your matchup with the Feral Hippies and Stephen Lowen.
Wild.
74.2 to 73.7. Only a 0.5 margin of victory there, and that might be the tightest margin of victory that we had so far this season. I know last season we had one, I believe, that was only 0.1 or 0.2.
Yeah, I think it was 0.1.
But 0.5 this season, with the amount of points that we're scoring this year, is absolutely a nail biter. So the fact that you're able to squeeze away a win with that, I know Steven's probably kicking himself there because, yeah, 0.5 is not a lot.
Don't worry, Steven. There's some brotherly love done on that one.
Don't worry, Steven. Vandy's going to take you down next week, too.
That's right.
All
That's
right,
right.
and lads on tour taking on MLR All Access's team. Give me the loots. MLR All Access has been struggling this season so far, obviously relying a lot on those Seattle Seawolves players so far this season. It feels like last week they came off a bye, which was tough to get through. This week they only play a half of rugby, which was also not very helpful. So lads on tour took advantage of that, winning 64 to 29.3. Eagles overseas scoring the second highest point total of the week, racking up 84.3 points. The MLR stats is 66.3. You got Rugby Wrap Up, even without Rugby New York this week, was able to rack up 75.1 fantasy points, beat Dankus Anchor's Hokies team, 64.8 point total for him. So Rugby Wrap Up goes away with the victory there. And yeah, Vandy, the big win over Rugby Morning, scoring the highest point total of the week, 87.8 total fantasy points over Rugby Morning, 76.6. That's impressive stuff, man. Obviously, a tough stretch here when it comes to scoring points over the start of the season, but now it looks like that might be in the rear window after a couple weeks here of scoring 70-plus points each week, which has been pretty impressive.
If I get my first-round pick back, too, just wait, boys. I don't think he plays this season, but...
And we're talking about obviously LaRue Milan, but yeah, definitely making dues with what you do have here. So let's have a look at the standings here
let's do that.
on the Fantasy Ruckers League. Ruck and Roll, like we mentioned, top of the league,
Top
5-1, 539.1 points. I just find this hysterical because
No, it's
how much flack you were getting during this offseason about how poorly you were
up to the draft,
here.
during the draft, up to
during-
the end of the draft.
Deserved, too.
And talk about proving the doubters wrong. I mean, each and every week. I mean, the tables can still flip at any point in time here, but the fact that each and every week it seems like you continue to build confidence here is pretty impressive stuff. Rugby Wrap Up, lads on tour, Dankus Anchors come in at 2, 3, and 4 respectively, all with 4 wins and 2 losses. Rugby Morning, Eagles overseas, MLR stats in the 5, 6, 7 spots at that 500 record of 3 and 3. You got Feral Hippies, the Rucking Goats sitting in the 8 and 9 spots, 2 and 4, and then MLR All Access still searching for that first win, almost like the Dallas Jackals of our
1
league
point.
here. 0-6, still looking for that first franchise victory in the history of their existence here in Fantasy MLR, but I'm sure they'll be pulling hard for that moving forward. But
I gotta point out something though. Rugby Morning sitting at 3 and 3 is looking a little scary because look at the points for that they have.
Yeah.
They have the 3rd highest points for, and they're sitting at 3 and 3. They must have ran into some tough opponents in the last week. Ran into some tough ones. I really put up some points on them, but 480 points sitting at 3 and 3. That's somebody that you got to look out for that's going to start racking up some wins.
And I would be hard to admit if I didn't feel like a proud dad in this episode right now, seeing you guys kind of flourish here after having such a tough
Hey, let me
inaugural
boast
season.
in it. These might be the only wins I get.
That is true. That is true.
Let me
So
sit my own ragu, eh?
there you go. But yeah, that's the latest updates here for the Fantasy Ruckers League. Again, you can check that out on fantasyruckers.com. All the stats are up there. All the fantasy points totals are up there. And again, even if you're not a fan necessarily of Fantasy MLR, all the stats are there in terms of how these players are scoring these points for these league members are there as well. So you can really get an in-depth look into kind of how players are performing from a number standpoint so far in this 2023 season. season. Just a quick thing, reminder for our league members as well, and even those who are following along on the Fantasy Ruckers League, the top 6 teams in our league will be making playoffs. So we obviously got a tight race here. Really only 3 wins really, or 2 wins separating the playoff spots there, and in that race, Vandy, that you're kind of in the middle of to get that final playoff spot. You're only 1 win away as well.
That's
so
right.
really close
I'm
here
hungry.
so far in the Fantasy Ruckers League, which has kept things interesting. And we'll see whether or not anyone can really start pulling away with this. I know Matt's a little bit on the way there, but again, only 1 win above those 2, 3, 4 positions as well. But I mean, just like you mentioned about Rugby Morning about his point total, I think your point total, Matt, might be scaring some of these league members.
Not a chance.
Well. No, it's
Just
just a number.
Keep boosting the man up.
It's just a number, right? Just a number. All right.
The number that's higher than yours.
Points for don't help you.
There
in
you go.
playoffs.
And another quick reminder for our league members as well, keep on checking your eligibilities. I'm trying to work also through that. I know there have been a little some issues with dual eligibility on the fantasyruckers.com website. We are working to get that fixed as soon as possible. But for guys that are losing their eligibilities and gaining new ones, just keep an eye out for that. Some of the players to look out for this week: Mark O'Keefe, which is a pretty big one here, losing that center eligibility, move into the back 3 position there after starting 3 straight weeks at the back 3 with the return of Billy Meeks and Bryce Campbell there, looking like they're going to be overtaking the center roles for that Chicago Hounds team. Alejandro Torres losing his fly half eligibility, getting the center eligibility. Samisi Paya.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, go for it.
Second row eligibility now is what he has over the back row eligibility that he started the season with. Colin Gross of Old Glory DC, he earns the second row eligibility. And then Reese McDonald, that's a big one, Matt. You obviously drafted him at the start of the season, loses his fly out eligibility after having started a majority of his games at the fullback position, him gaining the back 3 position. So just keep an eye out. Make sure you're checking your rosters to make sure that nothing has changed on that front end. Because of course, as the season goes on and players start playing in their respective spots, that's definitely going to change as the season goes on. So that's the latest happenings when it comes to eligibility so far. All right. You guys ready to break down some of these matches and talk about the players that were able to give you guys your big weeks?
Oh, let's do
Yeah,
it.
Right, let's get into this. Let's get into this round 6 breakdown. Obviously, the first matchup of the weekend, starting at 3:00 Eastern on the Saturday. Old Glory DC taking on the NOLA Gold at home. This was a tight one, back and forth affair. Not necessarily the cleanest match, but still an exciting one to follow. Really, like I said, went back and forth here. I believe it was 12-10. Old Glory DC leading at half. Really went right down to the wire. Old Glory DC trying to surmount the phases there to try to score one in the final minutes of the matchup. It ended up being stopped short by a knock-on, and NOLA Gold was able to squeak away with the victory, 20-17. Before we kind of talk about some of the fantasy relevant players, Matt, your kind of thoughts on this Old Glory DC NOLA Gold matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Old Glory DC actually dominated majority of this game.
They did.
From when I was watching, and it was kind of just, NOLA, I think, a perfect example is kind of that JP Duplessis try where it really was something out of nothing. It was a bad kick by Tusitala, bad chase, bad placement of the kick that led to a really great counterattack and kind of led to a fluky type try. But really it all started from that bad kick that Tusitala put up. I thought Old Glory DC kind of shot them in the foot in some cases, and they were really had a control of most of this game, and it kind of just gave NOLA Gold the ability to stay in it and continue to stay in it, and at the end of the day, be able to kick that final penalty point. I just want to throw out the fact that I heard the most ridiculous comment, Ryan and Vandy, at the like leading up to this last penalty kick. I heard the most ridiculous comment from the commentator saying, "Oh, if they make it, good decision. If they don't make it, bad decision." And I said, well, that has to be the dumbest take.
That's such a media take, eh?
And what are you saying? Of course, if you make it, it's a good decision. If you don't, then you're probably going to think that you could have done something else. But you don't have that foresight. Anyways, I thought that it was a great decision for them to go for the penalty kick. They needed to get above or get ahead. and then force Old Glory DC to work all the way back to the field, all the way back to the other end of the field.
And we'll get to more into individual performances, but I know NOLA has started to really turn things around here in the season so far. I believe they've won now 3 matches in a row, I believe, and a big part of that has been Rodney Iona, and with his ability of kicking, who obviously they have the trust in him to be able to do that. But yeah, let's start talking about some of these individual guys. I mean, we got to start off the top. You mentioned his name, Matt, and it's a guy that you have on your roster, JP Duplessis, continuing to be an electric player here. Now has gone 4 straight weeks with double-digit performances, 2 straight weeks of 20-plus performances. A little bit of luck involved in this matchup. Obviously, you admitted to it, Matt. The kind of the backwards knock-on landing right in the hands of JP Duplessis. Well, backwards drop ball that landed right into the hands of JP Duplessis, taking advantage, taking it to the house. 22.7 fantasy points, among one of the highest in the week so far. Scored the try, 126 meters gain, added 12 tackles on top of that. JP Duplessis is right now the leading scorer in all of fantasy MLR right now, and you picked him up at the bottom of the first round. He's looking like he might be the steal of the season.
I don't think it's a surprise that the way that he's playing is aligning with the way that Nola Gold is performing. Like he is necessary for that team.
Man, he's all over the field. Absolutely all over the field.
Oh yeah. I mean, he doesn't just run the ball, and he doesn't just break. I mean, his footwork is incredible. So he's able to break the line and really get 5 to 10 meters gain to carry. But the other thing is the steals. I mean, that guy just sticks his head into breakdowns, and I just see him pop up, and every time he gets in there, nobody's moving him. The guy's a mutant.
Yeah. Absolutely. JP Duplessis, I don't think it's a coincidence, like you said, Matt, that his kind of emergence is really leading to Nola's success here over the past few weeks. Another guy that has been a big part of that success, Tom Florence, continuing to do big things from the back row position for this team. 3 straight weeks now with double-digit performances, none of those weeks including a try. So he's doing this all without scoring, and that's pretty impressive stuff. This most recent week against Old Glory DC, scoring 16.7 total fantasy points, 97 meters gained, 15 tackles, add a steal in there as well. Tom Florence seems like to be as consistent as they come when it comes to fantasy players in the MLR.
Everybody. He breaks the first tackle every time. I love watching this guy run.
Yeah. Pretty exciting stuff. A couple more players on the NOLA Gold that I want to mention as well. A big player here, obviously we mentioned him before about his kicking ability, but Rodney Iona, he is definitely doing some good things here for the NOLA Gold. He obviously had that massive performance in round 4 where he put up 30+ points there, but had a little down week last week, but comes right back here against Old Glory DC with a 16.2 fantasy point performance, 80 meters gained, 9 tackles, but the big thing being the kicks here. Obviously 2 penalties, 2 conversions to add on top of that. So 16.2 performance for Nola's fly half, not too shabby. And then last guy I want to mention, Jordan Trainer, Vandy. He's a guy that you picked up, was instrumental. You had him in your starting lineup, I believe, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you obviously took advantage of that. Didn't make an appearance last week, but comes back off of the rest week with a 15.7 point fantasy performance, 1 try, 90 meters gained, 4 tackles. He's another guy that was instrumental there for that NOLA Gold.
Got pretty lucky on that try, but hey, we'll take it.
Hey.
Landed right in the bread basket. He taps for him, but hey, we take those.
You got to be there. You got to be there to catch the ball.
Absolutely. All right. And then now shifting over to the Old Glory DC side, a couple players here. I think the biggest one that I want to mention here is Tito Diaz-Bonilla. He's a guy that's been pretty consistent at the fly half position. A large part of that being because he's so good at kicking. 4 penalty kicks in this match, and adding 84 meters gain on top of that, leading to the 16.3 point performance for him. He's looking like he's one of the premier fly halves to own in fantasy rugby right now.
It almost looks like when they get a penalty anywhere inside, in almost every location inside the opponent's half, their first instinct is now, hey, let's get 3 points. You've got this guy at our disposal that is going to 9 out of 10 times slot the kick. That's something great to have. And they're using him, and he's making a big impact these past few weeks. And not just that, but he's also been instrumental in kind of orchestrating that offense that they have.
Yeah, Absolutely. And then the last guy here that I want to mention on Old Glory DC side, again, not many big time performances on Old Glory DC side. Because I mean, only scoring one try there, obviously from Will Talatina there with that cheeky little kind of try line kind of touch there right towards the end. The guy that I do need to though mention for this Old Glory DC side, lastly here, is Marcos Young, and we're going to talk about him more in the waiver wire segment and the streamer segment. But 104 meters gained, 8 tackles, back-to-back weeks now with 15 plus points in the fantasy week. He's looking like he's really establishing himself in this Old Glory DC lineup and is proving to be a scoring threat there on the outside, and also a meter eater. That's a new one. A meter eater.
Meter eater.
Quoting James Deal.
There. Yeah, Marcos Young having a pretty good week here in round 6 as well.
Yeah, I'll throw out another name just before we move on to the next match. I thought Mike DeBoulis. They keep calling him Chicken on the broadcast.
They do call him Chicken.
I have to remind myself that apparently that's his nickname. But he's got a fantastic mustache, and he's also looking like a great streamer and a great pickup to kind of replace Kurt Baker because he's electric. I love to watch him carry the ball. And he actually looked really good.
Yeah, and that is something to keep in mind. We'll talk about it there in the waiver wire segment. But yeah, Kurt Baker is out right now, and obviously DeBoulis making the most of that opportunity there. I will mention too, and I think they mentioned on the broadcast, Nick Suchon and DeBoulis look almost identical. With the mustache and everything, it's quite comical there. For that. I also want to correct myself there too as well. It wasn't JP Duplessis that took advantage of that. No, it was the Jordan Trainer.
It was Jordan Trainer. Yeah,
it was the Jordan Trainer fluke try that happened there.
Both of them were kind of fluky. One of them, Cale Hodgson, kind of tipped up in the air, and JP Duplessis was just happened to be there. Jordan Trainer was the crossfield kick, and then the lock picked it up and did a nice little behind the back offload to Jordan Trainer and put it in. So I would say the JP Duplessis was a little more fluky.
Okay.
The Jordan Trainer one, I would say that was
great position.
That was a nicer
great position.
Great position. Oh yeah.
All right. So let's shift on now to the Utah Warriors Toronto matchup, and I like we said in the teaser here, there are really two types of fantasy matches, one that has a whole bunch of points and one that doesn't. So you look at this Old Glory DC NOLA matchup, obviously some solid fantasy points on both sides, not necessarily the highest scoring match there, but at least there were fantasy relevant players on both sides. This one, all one-sided. You had Utah guys.
Second half one-sided.
Sure. I mean, I get it from a rugby match perspective a little bit, but if you're looking down the list from fantasy performers, there is no one on this Toronto side that you really wanted to have that was going to be doing you anything beneficial. Is there a name there that you want to mention, Matt?
I would throw out, but let's talk about the match first before we get to that.
Okay. Overall thoughts on Utah and Toronto.
Vandy, you got to go first, man.
Oh, my God. Are you kidding me?
Okay. How did you feel from the first half to the second half? Because I know how I felt. I want to know how.
We started off with the penalty, so I was like, okay, nice 3, and then we went down, and then I think it was like 36th or 37th minute, Joe Mono puts the move on. I don't even know who it was.
It was the rookie.
Was it the? Oh my God, that was disgusting. That was disgusting. I seen Lance Williams though. He's pointing so he could run towards the goalpost to make the kick easier because we missed the kick there.
Yeah.
But that was disgusting. They came out, got a try. But, okay, Joel Hodgson had a absolute game. He made 2 kicks, one to Joe Mono, and then the other one to Mika Kruse. Mika Kruse with the disgusting one-handed catch. But honestly, play of the game for me was when Lance Williams absolutely bowled over Sam Malcolm. Did you see that? For the try to Paul Lasike? Oh, my God, man. His shoes were left there. Homie was inside, his shoes came off.
That one was sweet, but Van, you brought it up, that Joe Mono try on Brendan Black.
Dude,
so the youngest player
in the history of the MLR.
In the history of the MLR takes over from another Arrow who was the former youngest player to start a match in the history of MLR. This guy, first half, Joe Mono's coming down, breaks his ankles, and I just see Brendan Black slap the ground and go, dang it. I'm like, hey, man, there's nothing you can do there. Welcome to the MLR.
Yeah, welcome to the
MLR.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All
That
right,
was
well,
ridiculous.
let's start breaking down some of these players in here. I mean, you guys mentioned a couple of them. So we'll start with the Utah Warriors side because I want to know what Matthew has to say in terms of fantasy relevant players for the Toronto Arrows side. But for me right now, obviously we got to start off with it. I mean, Joe Mano was
Oh
the
my.
player of the week. This is a
Yeah.
guy that it might be the
Literally.
it might be the highest point total that has been scored in this season so far. 35.6 total fantasy points.
Yeah.
196 meters
Yep.
gained, 3 tries, 5 tackles, puts it right up there with the Rodney Iona performance from a couple weeks ago. But this guy should have carried Rugby Morning to an easy victory for
I don't know
for his
how you
fantasy squad.
lose
I have no idea,
Vandy
Vandy,
with
how-
him in your lineup.
You honestly got the best of both worlds here. Being a Utah Warriors fan,
Dude, at the time though, it was so bittersweet because you're watching it and you want to be excited because your team's winning. But then that's the thing about fantasy, when people have your guys, that and they have such an impact in the game, it leaves just that bittersweet. You're like, okay, we scored enough now. Like,
But then, hey, you saw Joel Hodgson going off.
oh my, and he
Yes.
missed a couple kicks. I think he
I-
missed
and I-
2 kicks.
I still can't believe how you were able to squeak away a victory there with in a matchup that you were taking on Joe Mano. But I guess that just goes to show you the kind of the point spread that you had on your side as well.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, Joe Mano, big time performance there. Let's talk about Joel Hodgson since we've mentioned him so much so far. He also had a fantastic matchup.
Missed 2 kicks.
22.2 fantasy points, 74 meters gained, 2 try assists, 6 tackles, and then of course was 3 successful conversion kicks and 2 penalty kicks as well. So really exactly what you want to see from a kind of carry fly half position there for your week. Another guy that I got to mention is Mika Kruse. This is a guy that has been starting historically at the back 3 position, but starts for the first time in the 2023 season at the center position. Doesn't matter. 84 meters gained. I think the big stat here is starting at the center position. We know how much of a threat Mika Kruse is from the meters gained perspective. He's passed the triple digit mark twice so far this season, but he was able to rack up 15 tackles in this matchup on top of what he was able to do in scoring that try and racking up those 84 meters gained in round 6, and that led to his 20.4 point performance there for the Utah Warriors. Anyone else on the Warriors side that you want to mention?
Caleb McEnany could have
yeah,
too
I
if
was
he didn't
gonna
get
say.
pushed from behind.
I was going to say,
That
he
was a penalty.
looks good. He
I
looks
don't
good.
care.
I really love the way Caleb McEnany looks.
Dude, he's so
He
fast
is-
and electric.
Yeah, he is something else from on the counterattack. He's something else in
Mhm.
that 15 position for Utah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4 out of 5 weeks, double-digit performances, 15.2 fantasy points, 78 meters gained, scored the try there as well. Yeah, Utah putting on a big-time performance against the Toronto Arrows and making the most of it. And then now shifting over to the other side for the Toronto
Oof.
Arrows. Yeah, Matt, you tell me, man, who would you have? I mean, maybe you throw
Look,
Ross Brody in there.
Yeah.
Possibly, but I think the try really just kind of, salvaged kind of the performance there.
Yeah, I mean Ross Brody's he's one of the guys on Toronto that you're just gonna want on your team. There's not many 9s in the league with it at his caliber, and he's just a guy that you just hope for a good performance.
But he
I mean,
hasn't.
look,
He hasn't had good
yeah,
performance.
that is true. That is true. But that's just a nature of the way that the team's going, and the team's just riddled with injuries. We saw it. We saw Mitch Eady in the centers.
Yeah.
Even he
That's
didn't
true.
really perform that well in the centers when you expect, the guy having a chance to, an 8-man having a chance to run in that center position. He didn't really have that big of a week. He had one big run at that. And honestly, him being in the centers kind of probably allowed for a lot of those tries on the outside, just because the center is the most integral part of that defense. You don't have that connection, don't have that experience, your defense is done. Who do I think on the Toronto Arrows can be a pickup? I think that Lalani Faleva can continue to be a pickup with the way that he looks on this Toronto Arrows team. That's 2 games in a row. The game last week, no tries, but looked explosive. The game this week gets a try, looks explosive on the try. Despite Toronto's struggles, if you get some explosive runs from a front row, he is going to be up there with some of the top performers in the front row, just for the fact if he goes on a 60-meter, gets 60 meters gained, 50 meters gained, 70 meters gained, you'll take that from your front row position, and then he'll add some tackles on top of it.
Sure. Back-to-back weeks with double-digit performances, 11.4 in round 5, 11.7 in round 6. So yeah, definitely on the
I just
higher
don't feel
side when it
safe
comes to
playing
front row
Toronto
players.
players, man.
That's
That
true.
is true.
I
That
mean,
is
you
true.
do got to keep in mind though. I believe if I'm looking at the schedule here correctly, the Toronto Arrows will have obviously this
Jackals.
next weekend's matchup against the Jackals, which you may consider. You could probably maybe play some there,
There
but I
you
don't know with the
go.
injury. I have
I'm
no
not.
idea.
The
We'll
Jackals
talk
look
about it
good.
in a bit here, but they are going to be returning to Toronto soon. It's going to be a tough matchup against the New York Ironworkers to open up their kind of home stretch here. But nonetheless, we know kind of how this Toronto team is able to kind of turn things around when they do play at home and play at least a little bit better. May bring some fantasy relevance moving forward. So that is something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, pretty exciting matchup. Obviously, the turnaround at the half and the big time Joe Mano performance. But yeah,
Oh,
just one of
brr.
these games where it felt like a lot of the fantasy production was happening on one side with one team and maybe not so much on the other. So an interesting one of those type games. And then talking about, I guess, games that fantasy managers
Let's not even talk about this.
don't like talking about. Is
I don't want
low
to talk
scoring
about
games with not many points at all. And who would
it.
have
Game
thought
sucked.
that it was going to be a game that was between the New England Free Jacks and the Dallas Jackals? Because heading into this one, you were probably saying, hey, I'm playing all my New England Free Jacks players against the Dallas Jackals team. But that proved to not necessarily be the case, as it was the New England Free Jacks only squeaking away with the win here, 10-9. There over the Dallas Jackals, which is definitely not something you would expect for a team that has been rolling like the New England Free Jacks and at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness they had 2 games on it. I mean, this is the only good thing about having 2 games on at the same time is the fact that I didn't need to pay attention to this New England Free Jack Dallas Jackals game because this was awful. I mean, the weather stunk, sure, but the amount of drop balls and errors that I was literally watching a drop ball every other play, and it was just like there's no continuity. It's not a fun game to watch. There's no really fantasy relevance because you know the guys that are playing are just gonna stink up your team. Unless your name's
All the
Ryan
points came
Conradi.
off penalty kicks.
All the points came off penalty kicks. There was only one try. Exactly. Like, I mean, I love to see Dallas Jackals be there and be that close to the top team in the East. But like, oof, this one was a tough watch.
Yeah. And I don't think we need to spend too much time on it because, again, from a fantasy perspective, there's not one that fantasy managers want to see. Really, on both sides of the ball, I would say that really the only fantasy relevant player coming out of this was Ryan Conradi, who you mentioned, Matt. He's been rolling. I mean, five straight weeks where he's hit double-digit performances, 16.1 fantasy points in round 6.
Yep.
Obviously, he adds his first try of the season in round 6, 49 meters gained, 14 tackles, a steal as well. Ryan Conradi seems to be one of the staple fantasy players for this New England Free Jacks side, and the manager who owns Ryan Conradi is definitely happy with what he's been able to do so far this season.
Sam Gallo looked okay out there too, I guess.
Yeah, he does. I mean, for a rookie.
Yeah,
Andy,
yeah,
we were
yeah,
talking about his
exactly.
last is the fact that he's had like consistent weeks of showing up and performing and just doing what he has to do. Nothing special, nothing bad, just consistency. And that's impressive from a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're talking about kind of contrasting games that managers like and don't like from a fantasy perspective. Old Glory, DC, NOLA, people love it. Lots of fantasy point scoring there. Obviously loving it to see what you had on Utah there in their victory over Toronto, 47-19.
Only last player I do want to bring up, Rye, from this game, because we didn't really mention anybody from Dallas outside of Sam Gala. Adrian Boyson. That's 3 weeks in a row with almost around 20, 21, 22 tackles. I mean, that's consistency at its finest. And even at the games that stink, you're going to have to tackle somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the glory of having those guys that can really get the high count.
That's what keeps games low scoring, guys like that.
It is true too, though, Matt, because again, like you're talking about a guy that's racking up as many tackles as he has. It seems like his base threshold is that on a weekly basis, he's not going to score you any less than, let's say, 7 or 8 points, and that's pretty. That's
not bad for a
I mean,
back row.
if you just need a guy that you need to slot in. Let's say you have another one of your players that's on bye, you can just depend on this guy being able to at least get you adequate points. That's not going to lose you a week. He might not win you the week, but he's definitely not going to lose you the week either. So definitely something to be said in the value of those types of players as well. So no, definitely good point there, Matt. All right, and then shifting over to kind of a match that was completely on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of points being scored. Rugby Atlanta, Houston. Obviously, Houston pulling away with things there in the match at the start, but then Rugby Atlanta slowly crawling its way back there. Houston ended up getting the victory, 40-28 at home. Overall thoughts of this matchup before we get into the fantasy perspective of things.
Taylor two
Houston,
halves, man. Taylor two halves. Like,
I mean, Houston ran away with that, Vandy.
35-0 at half or something.
Yeah, they ran away. And I mean, Atlanta tried their best in that second half, and they tried to come back.
Yeah.
But they just didn't.
Coates
looked
looked great off the boot, too.
Oh, yeah.
Man, he looked good off the boot.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's break down some of these players that were so successful here in this round. I mean, let's start off with David Coates because he seems like he's a guy that has been pretty instrumental for this Houston SaberCats team, because I think there was a lot of hype with this team going into the season, and it seems like they are backing that up with some of these big time performances. And David Coates right now sitting as the 9th best player in all of fantasy right now.
That last game helps.
A big part of that is this 26.1 point performance against the Rugby Atlanta squad this past weekend. 84 meters gained, 2 tries, 9 tackles, and 5 conversion kicks to add on top of that. David Coates, that's exactly what you were looking from this guy as a guy. Why we had him up there in kind of the among the better fly halves in this MLR season when it comes to fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought we had another great game by the center, or not the centers anymore because Lawrence Vanderskiff was back this game. But Christian Dyer, Dom McKenna, both, you know, again, great games from the two. Christian Dyer, whether he's at center, when he's at wing, he's a great start, and he's having an unreal season.
Was that Dean Muir's first game back?
It
yeah,
was.
and he
looked pretty good.
We got to talk about him. It's almost like the set piece.
Somebody in the Discord said the team just seems to be more electric when he's on the field.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, watching that set piece, because like the past weeks, the set piece, honestly, they didn't have that same scare. Like I wasn't as scared every time that they got a penalty and or a line out on the 5. But with Dean Muir sitting at the back and conducting them all, it just seems like they're just, it's that much more effective and that much more kind of lethal.
But you know what? That try by Labuschagne, that was like that sealer from him when Atlanta was coming back. They had a 28 point. It was like 35-28, and I was like, this is becoming a game. And Labuschagne ran through that guy, spun off the tackle, didn't get wrapped up, and slammed it in. I'm like, damn, that's the sealer. That's it.
Yeah.
Steven's probably yelling at the TV like that was dope.
Yeah, well, we know what Labuschagne can do, and he was going to be my next guy that I brought up here as kind of one of the top performers here for Houston. 15.6 fantasy points, 91 meters gained, that try score that you mentioned there, Vandy, and 5 tackles on top of that.
Yeah.
And Dean Muir, Matt. I mean, he was I believe 12 points for a front row position his first game back, and I believe he was the highest front row taken, or one of the highest front rows taken when it comes to the fantasy MLR draft. So
pretty sure.
Yeah, Dean Muir, we'll see what he's able to.
He was the first round pick.
Yeah. So we'll see how he's able to kind of transition that. His first appearance in the season, 12 points, not too shabby at all. And then moving over to the Rugby Atlanta side, I want to talk about, I mean, Will Leonard, right? Like we talk about guys that kind of have started to turn things around here a little bit.
That's right.
Will Leonard, after having a slow start to the season, seems to kind of be finding his way here. 80 meters gained, 13 tackles, still looking for his first try of the season, but 12.4 fantasy points in a game that was pretty out of hand, and then obviously them trying to crawl their way back. Yeah. It's not too bad, and he was a guy that kind of had a lot of high hopes heading into the season, and I think it seems like he is on the upwards trend here. At least
he gets a lot of tackles too, though.
Yeah, he does definitely get his head stuck in, but I wonder how much of it is also related to Ruida Biddle being out.
True.
You know, Ruida Biddle got injured, I think, like halfway through last game or something like that. So Will Leonard maybe was relied upon a bit more. And then this week, obviously, Biddle wasn't in there, so Will Leonard is kind of the guy. So I wonder how much that plays into it, but we're definitely seeing a trend of Will Leonard starting to come back into the form and what we expect from the guy.
Got to mention to Rangatira Waitokia.
Outside center start.
83 meters gain. Yeah, started for the first time outside center. Has been kind of inconsistent in appearances this season so far. Started in round 3, started in round 5 at the back 3 position, and then finally getting round 6 at the center position. 16.1 fantasy points. Pretty formidable performance there. And then I got to mention Jack Shaw as well. Back 3 player for the Rugby Atlanta squad. 108 meters gained, 4 tackles, 14 fantasy points. He's a guy that people may look at the waiver wire. I know he's available. We'll probably discuss that and break that down. It's his one big time performance. Is his first double digit performance on the year, so got to tread with a little bit of caution in terms of how much weight you put into this performance. But nonetheless, he was one of the top players from this matchup as well. Anyone else that we want to mention here between this Rugby Atlanta Houston side?
I thought there was an interesting point made about Dom Akina during the Utah game, and I was talking about how Polisike went from back 3 to center that game, and they were noting that it's kind of similar to Dom Akina, where he played back 3 last year for I can't remember who, San Diego,
Austin.
Gilgronis.
Yeah.
So he played back 3 for them, and now he's playing center, and they're like these big guys that are fast on the feet, man. Like it's just, it seems they're dominant at that center position.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's shift on over now to the Seattle Seawolves Chicago half matchup.
Half
game.
Some of our fantasy managers were pretty. I
played too many.
Everyone has a little bit of stock on Seattle because they are one of the better teams in the MLR. And some of our league managers making jokes saying, "Hey, I think we should just double all the points that these guys got since they only played half."
Dude, I would have been so down for that too.
And it's just funny. I don't know how else you would really approach that situation. Obviously, the weather wasn't going to let up anytime soon where it would have been safe for these teams to play. And I don't think you can really postpone it in any way and say, hey, we'll finish this next half later. So really kind of a rock in a hard place situation when it comes to kind of doing that. Again, I think it would have been more of a discussion if the game was a little bit closer. But Seattle, again, just running away with it. Chicago continues to struggle. 27-5 at half, and then when they ultimately called it. So at least you weren't lost without any fantasy performance.
Yeah, a little Petty got a try.
There still were some there. Obviously, I think if you had the full matchup, it would have been a different story. Maybe some of these Seattle guys may have gone off a little bit more. Matt, I know you're a Duncan Matthews guy. He didn't really have that big of a showing, but he might have had something in there. Yeah, it was interesting to see kind of how that played out. But nonetheless, we'll try to break down as much as we can from the half that was played. Overall thoughts, kind of. I mean, Chicago keeps on struggling. You still play their centers. I mean, in the half of play, Bryce Campbell was able to rack up 51 meters gain. Julian Dominguez looks like he's still explosive on the outside.
I still think their backline looks good, right? I still think their backline, like Mark O'Keefe, actually looks very comfortable on the wing, and he looks good. He looks good. I would still be playing like Billy Meeks. Their entire backline, maybe outside of Michael Baska, I think are decent starts on a week-to-week basis. Chris Matina gets you points. Julian Dominguez, like you said, and Billy Meeks and Bryce Campbell, all of them they just do what they do. And unfortunately, the team ends up losing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, the Seattle Seawolves, I think they're just kind of the epitome of what good rugby looks like in this MLR, this league right now, because they're absolutely rolling. But yeah, let's talk about some of these fantasy performers from Chicago's standpoint of things. I mean, when you only score 5 points, and it's a Lindsey Stevens set piece try, really not much points to be had here. But again, you had Bryce Campbell who reached the 50-meter mark, Chris Matina 66 meters. So you were scratching away with some fantasy points there, but really not much. But shifting over to the Seattle Seawolves, even in the half of play, I mean, you got guys like Dan Creel racking up 78 meters.
Oh, he looked good.
He looked really good at the center position. A total of 8. I mean, just 8.8 fantasy points in just one half of play. If you go with that whole double digit thing, he's getting 17.6 fantasy points, going through. So, and that's without a try being scored either. So Dan Creel looked solid. I got to give a shout to.
Don't say it.
Who?
He did it again. He scored another try. We know why he scored another try.
Ricky
Reichert had it. Yeah. And this is the guy that I want to bring up, because this guy, it doesn't matter if you play 10 minutes, 40 minutes, 80 minutes, 90 minutes, 1 minute, he's going to find a way to score, because this guy is absolutely nuts. He's nuts.
That's one commonality. There's also another commonality
Dude, wait,
between
on
this
his
season
try,
and
it
last
didn't even look
season.
like somebody wanted to tackle him.
Nobody wants to tackle him. Look, you got a big lumble of sandwich or trombolone sandwich just running at you. Like, what are you supposed to do?
You know what? I got lucky with Lopetti and Peter Malcolm's performance. 8.7,
Yeah.
7.8 in one half.
Streaming that Peter Malcolm start. Whew,
Yeah.
you never know which Malcolm's going to start every game.
You don't.
And by the way, just a shout out before we move on. Shout out to the Seawolves for giving AJ Alatima the start on the day after his birthday. Good on you guys.
Yeah, no kidding.
He looked good on the boot.
He's been starting so far ever since that kind of Jordan Chait scare towards the first part of the season. It's been the AJ Alatima show moving forward. But yeah, just to go back to Reichert Hadding, I mean, 4 straight weeks of scoring a try. 2 tries in round 2, 2 tries in round 3, 1 try in round 4, has the bye, 1 try in round 6. I mean, this guy...
the announcer at like the 30-minute or whatever is like, yeah, and Reichert Hadding at this point only has 1 try. Like, they just assume he's going to get 2. It's just a run. Like, it's just written already.
Vandy. I would too.
No kidding.
If I was,
The way they talk about him, man, is unbelievable. Like...
Yeah,
because they know he's the test
It
dummy
reminds me
to
of, like,
see whether
Bodie
they're going to
Waka.
legalize it throughout the entire
Dude, it reminds me
league.
of like Bodine Waka last year when it was just like every game was just like, okay, when's his sick play of the game coming? It's like, all right,
true.
when's Reichert's second try coming?
Matt, without your so let's do a little bit of a test here then for you guys here. If you had that first overall pick, okay, we're a third way through the season. If you had that first overall pick, who are you picking at that number 1 spot?
Anybody besides LaRue Milan. Literally anybody besides him.
I mean, I guess the obvious answers here are either JP Duplessis, Reichert Hadding. Yeah, I mean,
I'm taking JP because Reichie's gonna pop again. He's gonna have a 3-try performance. They're gonna test him.
I mean, to be fair, JP Noah Gold hasn't had a bye week yet.
That's true. That's true.
So it kind of explains why he's at the top. I mean, honestly, Tom Florence maybe.
You can make an argument for Tom Florence.
Florence,
Yeah.
Anyways, there's a lot of guys you can make an argument for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking.
Reichert Hadding, I think the fact that he scores a try every game, and I'm gonna put aside, my needle jokes. The guy finds himself in a try scoring position every game.
Dude, he's dominant.
Every game he finds himself in a position to break the line, either whether that's off what he's creating for himself or whether he's, in the right position to be there to finish off a play.
But imagine getting to offload
there.
the ball to that guy. Like, all right, I'm just gonna hand it to the bear.
I don't know. That guy's
top 10 right now in the world of fantasy MLR as we shift over here to kind of our waiver wire streaming segment. JP Duplessis number 1, Joe Mano, which is pretty impressive at number 2.
That 30-point performance.
That 30-point performance is going to help a lot. Tom Florence at number 3, Rodney Iona at 4. Interesting to see 3 of the top 5 are NOLA goal players, but again, Matt, to your point, they haven't had a bye week yet, so I think there is something to be had there as well. Wyan Conradi, number 5 there, Mika Kruse, number 6, Reichert Hadding, number 7, Jordan Jackson Hope, number 8, David Coates, number 9, and Duncan Matthews, number 10. And then just outside, and ironically enough, that's our top 10 is all within the 70. No one is lower than 70 points. The guy just outside that in the 11th position is Tito Diaz-Bonilla at 69.6 fantasy points. So
glory.
Nice.
Yeah, interesting kind of top 10 there. We'll see how that rolls. It will be interesting to see how that shifts though once everyone has had their bye week. But nonetheless, at this point in time, it looks like some of these players absolutely would not have expected them to be as high as they were. And some of I think the biggest thing for me, guys, is the names that are missing from that top 10. There are a whole bunch of names on that list.
LaRue Milan.
You would have thought.
Every time I get to plug that name,
you got to get over it. You're just trying to speak it into existence so that he dresses up this the next coming week.
Of course, he's your first round pick. You play fantasy sports.
Get over it.
All right, let's start talking about this waiver wire segment now.
Don't be a clown and pick him first round when you know he's hurt.
I think
because Google didn't say anything about it.
I think the discussion that we got to start now having when it comes to this waiver wire segment, guys, is maybe not so much of looking for these kind of diamonds in the rough that you're going to pick up.
Remember, Vandy already picked up all the league winners.
Maybe there's a couple of them that you can maybe still spot out. But I think now we've kind of are shifting the conversation to more of a streaming type conversation. You're looking for guys where you have a bye week. Who are you looking at picking up to kind of fill those roles? So just having a look at who is on bye week this week.
There is nobody on bye week, Ryan.
No one on
all
bye.
12 games are playing.
And I believe
everybody's for the
12
for the
games,
pickings.
eh?
And I believe we have
12 games are all playing.
I believe
all 12 of
I
them.
believe we have a Friday matchup. Is that correct?
We do, but we still, I'm pretty sure, have 2 games at the same time on Saturday.
right.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, well,
There's so many times on Sunday you can choose.
So many hours in the day.
Literally,
It's
I
Dallas
can
Jackals
only
again.
watch. What if somebody only has one device? How many? You can't even watch Rugby Network unless you have Roku
Oh, it's
TV
not.
on TV. Like, what are you supposed to do?
All right. Well, then, talking about waiver guys and talking about guys that you might pick up here. I mean, some of the names may be Marcos Young is in there. Martini Talapusi might be up there. I know he's been kind of picked up and dropped on some lists going forward.
Just by me.
You mentioned Lolani Faleva, Matt. And then you kind of, I think the big question is maybe a guy like Jack Shaw who had a big time performance, but maybe that's
I would
just a
think about maybe
one-off.
Averin Ottoman for Toronto.
I was thinking
Because they're
about
against
that.
Dallas. He's had 2 good weeks now.
2 good
Even with the
weeks.
team playing bad.
Even with the team playing bad, and he does have that role solidified for the time being as they deal through injuries right now. So
Although
that
they
might be
just
an
picked up
interesting
2 back 3 guys, what does
True.
that look like? How
That
does
is
that
true.
get plugged into the
True.
roster?
So maybe more of a streamer standpoint against a Dallas matchup that does play in Toronto's favor. But I guess the big one, guys, I think we're all in agreement here. Marcos Young, he's the one that everyone needs to be looking at in this week.
Yeah, I'm going to throw another guy in there. And Vandy, you're going to like this. What does the center position look like for Utah? I mean, Tyler Fisher looked real good
Dude, he did look real
for
good.
Utah. And this is his first start. This was his first game that he played this year. He was a regular starter last year for Utah. And I know it's because Paul Lasike was came off
Paul
the bench.
Lasike could go back to back 3 though.
Yeah, but I'm saying Mika Cruz can go to that back 3 position.
That's true.
Back to the wing where Mika Cruz is more comfortable, looks good. Tyler Fisher looks really good last week. Maybe he's a guy to look out for. If he's in that starting lineup, I wouldn't be afraid to pick him up.
Yeah. Anyone else that you have on the list, guys?
No, I think you're right. It's kind of at this point, you're looking for streamers, you're looking for slim pickings. Honestly, a lot of those decisions are going to be made once you figure out that one of your guys in your team is not starting this week.
My wild card, Naposki.
I do think I do
Naposki.
Because against Toronto. He had one good, I think it was week 2.
Yeah, is this the week that you pick up Dallas guys because they're playing Toronto?
If
Or
it's
you pick up
if-
Toronto
if
guys
there's
because
any
they're playing
week,
Dallas.
if there's any week to play a Dallas guy, it's this week.
What do you do?
That's true.
Yeah, that is true.
That
That
is
is true.
true.
Everybody I saw on Twitter, I think Dealey was saying that,
But the
Dallas
thing is,
first
there's
win.
no bye week, so why would you need to? If it was like a bye
Well-
week issue, but they're all playing, so
well, what if you have a guy that isn't starting for whatever reason?
true injury.
True.
Yeah,
So-
that's my wild card, Naposki.
I think the way I put it here, I think the 2 players that you're dropping possibly Fab on, and I can imagine that people will be dropping Fab on, is going to be Marcos Young.
Yep.
And I mean, I would drop Fab on Tyler Fisher. I would take the risk on it. I think I would.
Tyler Fisher's a guy that I'm going to wait for the Utah lineup to come out. If he's picked up, he's picked up. It's the way she goes. But I don't want to drop Fab on a guy that I don't even know
$1, $2.
whether he's. I mean, $1, $2.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
I think
You-
you got to play the strategy. I think sometimes, and if you want first dibs on,
Don't
it,
tell
just
me
put
about
it to the
strategy,
waiver. And then yeah, I think that might be the idea is there. But yeah, I think if you want a guy that potentially you can start that has confidence here on a week out of week basis, it's going to be Marcos Young.
Another guy I'm going to throw out there that shouldn't be in the waiver wire and is Cara Pryor on Rugby New York. If he's back, I know he got hurt in the last, and I think in one of the few games, maybe not. But he is a guy that always has an electric game. Could be a nice little stream there for Rugby New York.
Sure. All right, you want to start breaking down, give some predictions here in this upcoming round
Let's
7,
break it
this
down.
jam-packed round 7. All right, well, we open up on that Friday matchup, March 31st. Utah taking on the New England Free Jacks at home here. Should be an exciting one, airing on Fox Sports 2. Should be interesting. Utah obviously coming off the big performance against Toronto. New England coming off of the tough performance against the Dallas Jackals. I'm still confident in the New England Free Jacks. I still think that they are, I would say, a pretty decent way ahead of the Utah Warriors when it comes to, I guess, power rankings and things like that.
Just
I
wait.
think the Utah Warriors' performance was slightly inflated because of facing a beaten down Toronto Arrows squad, to be honest. But are you afraid to play any of the players here on the Utah Warriors side, or do you think it's going to be kind of a high scoring affair that there'll be fantasy
Uh,
on both sides?
I'll put it this way. When we played the Jackals, we put up 33 points. I'm going Utah.
Whoa, this ain't the Jackals,
This
it's
is-
New England Free Jacks. These guys play defense, Vandy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
scared
they don't
of.
play
I mean,
much
the New
offense,
England,
apparently.
the New England, yeah, fair enough. But the New England Free Jacks, I think they have a really solid defense. I think it's actually might be tough for Utah to put up the same amount of points. But then again, Utah's back three and their back line is underratingly electric.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
I can see them go off as well. But I think the big story for me is, do we see Slade McDowell come in and play? Maybe potentially we see him come back and play. Also, Utah, what does that back line look like? I think that's kind of an interesting story for me because they saw a lot of players that they didn't, they had in that starting spot, Lasika coming off the bench, that continued to shine. And I'd be interested to see what that looks like moving forward for this game. And this is a big one too.
If you had to tell your gut, what does that backline look like for Utah for moving forward? In my gut, I'm going Joel Hodgson, Lasike, Fisher,
McEnany.
Kruse on the
Or
wing,
backline.
McEnany and the other wing, or on
I
the
would-
fullback, and then the other wing, Joe Mano. Right?
Mano.
Yeah,
That
I would switch the centers around. That's it. I would go Fisher at 12, Lasike at 13.
Then who's the odd man out there then? Who?
I believe they had
Bruce.
another guy who came in this week on the wing for Mika Kruse.
Okay. All right.
I forget his
So
name.
who are your picks? So Vandy picks Utah, obviously the homer pick there. Matt, who
Calvin
you got in
Whiting?
this one?
No, but he's been playing outside center.
Oh, okay.
But I think Tyler Fisher looks real good. But
Who's your
yeah,
pick?
I'm picking New England Free Jacks.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Oh,
pick
you-
New England. I'm gonna pick New England as well
You
in this
stink,
one.
man. I'm sorry.
All right. The next matchup, kind of the bottom tier matchup in Dallas. The opening matchup and the only matchup on Saturday.
Battle of the
8:05
Dust
p.m.
Dome.
8:05 p.m. kickoff.
Why?
Eastern
Why?
Time. Dallas taking on the
Because it's gonna be
Arrows.
such a good game, bro.
Why do they have 3 games overlapping?
Because
All
it's not
of them
like
are
NOLA,
overlapping.
Seattle, and New York and rugby are gonna be good. It'd be great
Alright,
games.
Whatever.
Switch
Whatever.
Dallas at the New York position and give New York versus rugby, or actually no, give NOLA versus Seattle the Saturday night special.
Whatever.
All right. I think there's 2 ways you can take this matchup. Are you avoiding this matchup completely because you think it's going to be just an absolute cluster of what's going to go on here? Or are you trying to get everyone in here because it just could be so high scoring
I'm
that
giving it
everyone's
to-
scoring points?
Jackals get their first win.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going with the Jackals in the first. Let's see the Jackals. I mean, look, Toronto's beat up.
Dude, I think
the
they
Jackals have
smoked
been-
Toronto.
Yeah, and the Jackals have been trending upwards. I mean, the past 2 games, they have shown that they can fight and they can be in the position to really compete.
33
And
to 10.
33. Holy cow! I'm just gonna call a Jackals win. I'm not ready to call any scores.
All right. I'll side with the Arrows here. I'll see if they can.
Homer. Homer.
All right, let's shift on now to the first matchup on Saturday, 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Chicago taking on the Houston SaberCats.
Cats, baby.
This is Houston all the way. And now I guess the question just becomes, I guess you play your back players on Chicago. You're expecting them to get that consistent 80 to 100 meters gain there between Billy Meeks, Mark O'Keefe, and Bryce Campbell,
hope.
Chris Matina. But again, Houston is a pretty strong side there, but I'm playing all my Houston players here in this one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
David Kotzler's going to eat.
Dean
Labuschagne is
Muir.
going to eat. Dean
I
Muir
think
is going to
somebody.
eat.
Yeah, I think someone to look out for is Tico Solomone.
Van
He
Vick.
hasn't played the past few weeks. Vandy, you pointed this out to me in text that he hasn't played the past few weeks. Nothing has really been said about him, why he's not playing. But if he plays, I can see him being electric and a guy to pick up.
Yeah,
I don't even know
so-
why. He's just not even on a bench spot. But whatever.
All right. So Houston for me, Matt.
Houston.
Cats, baby.
Cats.
All right, second last matchup here. Should be an exciting one. NOLA taking on the Seattle Seawolves at home,
Oh,
3 o'clock
this is a
Eastern time.
doozy.
This one's gonna be interesting because NOLA obviously has been rolling so far this season. They're
Second in
looking
the East.
really, really good. The Seattle Seawolves, though, among the best in the MLR, they haven't looked like they can be beaten so far this season. Gonna be an interesting one.
Yeah.
You're playing all your players in this one.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're paying.
Oh yeah. I think the big matchup is going to be JP Duplessis versus Dan Creel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that'll be an electric matchup to watch. Even just both centers against both centers.
I'm also excited to see kind of the counter game between these two teams, seeing what obviously Duncan Matthews historically does with the way that Rodney Iona boots the ball, but then also on the opposite end, Jordan Trainer, we've seen what he could do from the fullback position as well. Yeah. So to see that kind of contrasting matchup between those two fullbacks in that counter with two teams that have pretty formidable kickers in AJ Alatimu and in Rodney Iona should be interesting there as well. If I had to pick, I think I'm going to go Seattle Seawolves this one. I have a feeling I know what Matt's going to pick here. He's been riding with his team all season long. But Matt, who you got?
Let's go the NOLA Gators, baby.
At home too.
Oh yeah.
Should be a good one. Vandy, what about you?
I got to go Seattle.
You would.
Gotta go Seattle. All right. 3:00 Eastern time. Sorry, this is the second last matchup of the day. New York Ironworkers taking on Rugby Atlanta at home. This one should be an interesting one. Obviously, New York hasn't been in the form that we thought that they were going to be in this season so far after coming off of the championship in 2022. Rugby Atlanta also hasn't necessarily impressed that much this season so far. What are you looking for here in this matchup? New York's coming off of the bye. We should see a fresh New York team and a Rugby Atlanta team that's looking to bounce back from a Houston SaberCats loss.
Hopefully Andrew Coe's doing good.
Hey, Vandy, I got a message for you from Coe. Coe said he should be good after the bye week.
Yeah.
So look for him to be in this week.
All right. I'll play my boy Coe then.
But I think the Ironworkers definitely needed that bye week, and I think that bye week came at a really good time for them.
Yeah.
Kind of got a chance to refresh. I think they'll come back really strong. I think it'll be a tight match, though. But I'm still gonna go for Rugby New York here.
Yeah, I'll go Rugby New York as well.
I think just because it's a home game, I'm gonna go New York.
Yeah, that's a good call there. But yeah, should be interesting to see there. And then the last matchup of the weekend, 4:00 Eastern time, San Diego taking on Old Glory DC at Snapdragon Stadium. This one's gonna be an interesting one. San Diego also coming off of the bye. They look like a team that's kind of in the realm of where Seattle is. They've been rolling all season long. A lot of key fantasy MLR players on that team. Old Glory DC obviously still trying to kind of find their footing here and kind of turn the corner with their season so far. They've been close to winning some matchups, but have fallen short here in the last few weeks. Should be an interesting one at Snapdragon. But I will say, I do think that San Diego is going to win this one and should do so pretty easily here against Old Glory DC just because of how strong the San Diego Legion side is. And being at home and Old Glory DC traveling out west.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that you should. This is a good chance to play some of those San Diego guys. Like, I think Nate Augsburger is going to have a big game this week. I think potentially, Ma Nanu is going to have a good game as well. He'll just be electric as usual in the center position. But also look at Thomas Aoki. Like, he might have he's going to have a great game. And we've seen Nate Augsburger and Thomas Aoki. I've said his name two different ways, two different times. But both of them, I think, are going to have good games this week. Let's see them score some tries.
Yeah, should be interesting. So I'm going San Diego. Matt, you're going San Diego?
San Diego.
All right, and you, Vandy?
Yes, sir. San Diego.
San Diego.
Well, hey, got a jam-packed one. I think this is going to be an interesting one because everyone's team, predicting on everyone's lineup, like starting lineups or what we think they're going to be, should have full-powered lineups. So going through, obviously we've been going through the bye week stretch, I think for the past, we're in round 7 now. I think we've been having bye weeks since round 2?
Yep.
So this is really the first week since round one that we've had a full powered lineup for all the fantasy managers to have all the players at their disposal. Going to have some interesting lineup decisions to be made when it comes to your fantasy lineups. So make sure you're looking out for that. And it should be an interesting one, Matt. I know.
Don't worry, MLR All Access. I'll go easy on you.
I was just going to say MLR All Access has Ruck and Roll to take against, and then Matt or Vandy, you're taking on Stephen Lowen, who is coming.
You got him. It's a fight for 7th, baby.
That is a
fight
big,
for 6th.
That is a big time matchup there to
That's
see whether or
dope,
not you can
man.
jump.
Get into that playoff spot, Vandy. Let's go.
Jump Steven there. Of course, Eagles Overseas is taking on Lads on Tour. Dankus Anchors taking on MLR Stats, and we got the battle of the rugby outlets, Rugby Morning and Rugby Wrap Up taking on. And I know they have a little bit of banter there between those two and a rivalry going between them, so it should be interesting there. But an exciting round 7 to look forward to. Again, all the teams in full swing here in round 7, so it's going to be exciting to watch. Any final comments of what you're looking forward to round 7 and what you expect here? Because this is your last chance, guys. This might be the only episode that we have all season long where both of you are coming on a streaking wins here.
Vanny, what is this guy saying? Vanny, this guy wants to see. He might boost us up all the time, but he wants to see us lose. Look at this. This might be the last time. I think he's had the sad music queued up every week. He's hoping that he can push that dang button just to see us lose, Vanny. This is the commissioner of our league hoping to see us. Rugby Morning keeps throwing out that it's rigged for us to win. No. We're fighting against the odds, Vandy. No. We're fighting against the odds, Vandy.
We're in this one together, brother.
All right,
let's go.
Well, if you've had a fun time watching and following the fantasy MLR so far, it's been an absolute blast. Make sure you're checking out all of our different social media channels at the Fantasy Ruckers. Check out that website, thefantasyruckers.com. Like we said, all the great stats are on there, both fantasy related and non-fantasy related. So it's been a lot of interesting tidbits that you can pull from there. And of course, like we mentioned, got the Discord channel as well, where you can chat with other members in the MLR community and especially in the fantasy MLR community. Been having a lot of fun interacting with everyone on that side as it slowly grows, as fantasy MLR starts to take a stranglehold of the MLR and continue to become closer to becoming a real reality for everyone out there. It's been fun.
Let's do it.
All right,
keep winning, Vandy.
All right, well, let's wrap this thing up. The episode. I honestly thought you guys were going to come in a little bit hotter there with the talk there.
I'm still kind of nervous, man. I just want to keep living this high, and I don't want to get smashed in my face.
You don't want to go away.
Yeah.
You don't want the feelings to go away. Well, maybe you got to embrace the Matt mentality, where you can't let anything phase you. You come off a loss, you're good to go. You're winning. You're on a high. It's been funny to see how confident this guy has been over the next.
I was gonna say, he comes in off a high with his one loss, so yeah, pretty hard to not.
Yeah, no kidding. All right,
I endured plenty last season.
All right, for Vandy, for Matt Yee, I'm Ryan Yee, and we'll be back next week after round 7 to break down more of Fantasy MLR. We'll see you then.
Let's go.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.